The Ashworth ballroom smelled like money and lies. Alara Whitcomb stood near the refreshment table, her spine straight as a blade, watching the dancers spin in their practice circles. She'd been standing there for 40 minutes, alone, again. The champagne in her gloved hand had gone warm, but she held it anyway because it gave her something to do with her fingers besides clench them into fists. She was 24 years old and invisible in the worst possible way, the kind of invisibility that came from being too visible in all the wrong ways. My God, is she still here? The voice drifted from behind a marble column. Male. Amused. Familiar. Alara's jaw tightened. She didn't turn. I thought she'd have the decency to leave after the third waltz went unclaimed. That was Cedric Hale. Of course it was. His voice had that particular quality, smooth as silk wrapped around a knife. Perhaps she enjoys watching, another man said. Marcus Pemberton, probably. Cedric's constant shadow. Though I can't imagine what she sees in these gatherings. She towers over half the men here. A giantess at a garden party. Cedric laughed, that crystalline sound that had once made Alara's heart skip. Someone should tell her that Amazon queens went out of fashion with the ancient Greeks. The third man, she didn't recognize his voice, spoke up. Isn't she rather well-formed, though? I mean, certainly not conventional, but well-formed? Cedric's tone could have frozen water. My dear fellow, a draft horse is well-formed. Doesn't mean you want it in your drawing room. The woman has shoulders like a blacksmith and a tongue sharp enough to gut fish. Can you imagine introducing her to your mother? Good evening, madam. Meet my bride. Please mind her height. She's blocking the chandelier. The laughter that followed was ugly, genuine, the kind of laughter that came from men who'd never been laughed at in their lives. Alara's hand trembled, just once. The champagne swayed in the glass. She'd known Cedric for 3 years, had danced with him at the Harvest Ball, had let herself believe in small and stupid ways that his attention meant something. He'd called her fascinating once. Brilliant. Had asked her opinion on trade routes and agricultural reform, leaning close like her words mattered. She'd been a fool. The tragedy, Cedric continued, warming to his subject now, is that she's not unintelligent. If she'd been born a man, that mind might have actually been worth something. But in a woman, it's like putting a razor in a child's hand, dangerous and pointless. She argued with Lord Ravenscroft about naval strategy at Lady Whitmore's dinner. Naval strategy. The man nearly choked on his quail. What did she say? Something about merchant vessel drafts and coastal defense formations. Utterly inappropriate. I had to practically drag her away before she started drawing battle diagrams on the tablecloth. Someone should marry her off to a country vicar, Marcus said. Get her out of society before she does more damage. What vicar would take her? Cedric's voice dripped with mock sympathy. Poor man would spend his life standing on a stool to kiss his own wife. No, she's destined for spinsterhood, I'm afraid. A cautionary tale for girls who forget their place. Be graceful, be gentle, or end up like the Whitcomb woman, alone at every ball, too clever for her own good and too large for any man's comfort. Alara set the champagne down. Her hand was steady now. Perfectly steady. She didn't storm over to confront them. Didn't throw her drink in Cedric's face or deliver a cutting speech that would echo through the social pages. She didn't do anything at all. She simply turned and walked out of the ballroom, her silk skirts whispering against the floor. Her face was calm, composed, not a single crack showing in the porcelain mask she'd learned to wear. But inside, something fundamental was shifting, breaking, reforming into a shape harder than bone. The night air hit her like a slap when she stepped onto the terrace. Cold, clear. The kind of cold that made everything sharp-edged and honest. She walked down the steps into the garden, past the manicured hedges and the fountain with its ridiculous cherubs, until she reached the far wall where the lantern light didn't quite reach. Then, and only then, did she let herself feel it. Not the hurt. Hurt was useless. The rage. It burned through her chest like phosphorus, white-hot and chemical. Not the explosive kind of anger that made people scream and throw things. This was colder, more dangerous, the kind that calcified into something permanent. She'd spent her entire life trying to be smaller, softer shoulders, quieter voice. Opinions delivered as questions, never statements. She'd learned to hunch slightly when talking to men, to laugh at jokes that weren't funny, to pretend she didn't understand things she'd grasped immediately. She'd made herself into a puzzle with half the pieces removed, hoping someone would find her incomplete enough to be acceptable. And still, it wasn't enough. She would never be enough. Not for them. Alara pressed her palms against the cold stone wall and stared up at the stars. They were distant and indifferent, light from dead things still burning bright. "You're going to freeze out here," she spun. A man stood at the edge of the garden path. Tall, taller than her, which was rare enough to be notable. Broad-shouldered in a way that suggested function over fashion. His coat was black and unadorned, no embroidery or fashionable tailoring. There was a scar running from his left temple to his jaw, pale against weathered skin. His eyes were dark, assessing, and utterly unimpressed by the setting. Duke Alaric Thornvale, the northern warlord himself. Alara had never spoken to him directly, but everyone knew who he was. He appeared in London perhaps twice a year, attended the absolute minimum of social functions, and generally behaved as if the entire capital was a waste of his time. He had a reputation for bluntness that bordered on hostility and a complete disregard for social niceties. Most people found him terrifying. "I'll survive," Alara said, straightening to her full height. She didn't hunch, didn't soften. What was the point anymore? Alaric studied her for a long moment. "You're the Whitcomb girl." "Woman." And yes. His mouth twitched. It might have been amusement. "You left rather abruptly. Social emergency?" "You could say that." "Someone insult you?" Alara's laugh was sharp enough to cut. "Does it matter?" "I suppose not." He moved closer, boots crunching on gravel. "Though you're handling it better than most would. No tears, no hysteria. That's something." "Would you prefer tears?" "I prefer honesty, but that seems to be in short supply at these gatherings." Alara turned back to the wall, gripping the stone. "Then here's some honesty. I'm done. With all of it. The pretending, the shrinking, the desperate hope that if I just make myself palatable enough, someone might overlook the fact that I don't fit the mold they've created for women." "Why bother fitting molds?" Alaric asked. He wasn't looking at her with pity or curiosity, just frank assessment, like she was a map he was reading. "They're generally made by people with limited imagination." "Easy for you to say. You're a duke, and a man. You could show up to a ball wearing a potato sack and no one would dare comment." "True, though I'd probably still hate it." Despite everything, Alara felt her mouth curve slightly. "You're not enjoying the evening?" "I haven't enjoyed an evening in London in 15 years. I'm only here because my solicitor insisted I make an appearance before Lord Ashworth dies, and his idiot nephew inherits everything. Politics." How refreshingly blunt. "I find efficiency saves time." Alaric paused. "You're intelligent, aren't you? That's what makes them uncomfortable." Alara's breath caught. "Excuse me?" The drawing room crowd. They're bothered by intelligence in women the same way they're bothered by intelligence in horses. They want decorative, biddable, something that looks pretty and doesn't ask complicated questions. He shrugged. "Tedious people. Why do you care what they think?" "Because I live in this world," Alara snapped. "Because unlike you, I don't have a fortress to retreat to when society becomes unbearable. Because my options are marriage or irrelevance. And apparently I'm unsuitable for the first and resigned to the second. Are you fishing for reassurance? Because I'm not going to tell you you're beautiful in unconventional ways or that the right man will appreciate your spirit." His tone was matter of fact. "You're not beautiful by their standards. You're also not weak or stupid or easily controlled, which makes you dangerous to them, and they're right to be nervous." Alara stared at him. "That's possibly the rudest thing anyone has ever said to me." "Is it? Or is it just honest?" "Both, probably." Alaric's scarred face arranged itself into something that might have been approval. "Good. Then we can skip the part where I pretend to care about your feelings and get to the practical discussion." "What practical discussion?" "I need a duchess." The words hung in the cold air like frost crystals. Alara laughed. She couldn't help it. The sound came out harsh and disbelieving. "Is this a proposal? Because your courtship skills need work." It's not a proposal, it's a negotiation. Alaric crossed his arms. I have a ward. A boy, 7 years old, illegitimate son of my late brother. Society wants nothing to do with him. Wrong birth, wrong circumstances. I need someone to help raise him, manage the household, run the estate when I'm dealing with border conflicts. Someone intelligent enough to handle complex logistics and strong enough not to crumble under pressure. And you think I'm qualified for this because you were arguing about naval strategy at a dinner party and you didn't flinch when Cedric Hale tore you apart in public. He tilted his head. Most people break easily. You didn't break. You got angry. That's useful. Alara's heart was pounding. This was insane. He was insane. You're offering me a business arrangement. Yes, you become my duchess. You get security, resources, freedom from this. He gestured vaguely at the ballroom behind them, and complete authority over the household and the child's upbringing. In exchange, you run my fortress like the strategic operation it needs to be and endure being married to someone who has no interest in romance or social performance. You're serious. I don't waste time on jokes. Alara's mind was racing. This was mad. Completely mad. He was essentially offering her a job with a title attached. No love, no pretense of affection, just a cold exchange of services. It was also the first honest thing any man had ever offered her. Why me? She asked. You could have any number of suitable women. Suitable women want poetry and devotion and all the theater I don't have time for. They want to be adored. You want to be respected. That's the difference. You don't know me well enough to know what I want. Don't I? His dark eyes were steady. You're standing in a freezing garden instead of going back inside to salvage your reputation. You're angrier at yourself for caring than you are at Hale for mocking you. And you're considering my offer instead of slapping me for the insult to romance. He paused. I know ambition when I see it. I know strategy. You have both. So the question is, are you brave enough to take what you actually want instead of what you're supposed to want? Alara's throat was tight. Her whole life had been spent trying to squeeze herself into spaces too small for her frame, her mind, her voice. And here was a man offering her an empire instead of a cage. I'd need to think about it, she said quietly. Take a week. I'm staying at the Thornvale house on Belgrave Square. Send word when you decide. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Yes? That man inside, Cedric Hale, the one who humiliated you. Alaric's voice was cold enough to kill. If you accept my offer, you'll have the resources to destroy him, socially, financially, whichever you prefer. Just a thought. He walked away, boots crunching on gravel, leaving Alara alone with the stars and a decision that would reshape her entire existence. The week that followed was torture. Alara barely slept. She spent hours staring at her bedroom ceiling, running calculations in her mind like accounting ledgers. Advantages, disadvantages, risks, rewards. The advantages were staggering. Security, independence, authority, a child who needed her. An estate to manage, which was the kind of complex puzzle her mind craved. Freedom from the marriage market and its endless humiliations. The disadvantages were equally clear. Marriage to a man who didn't love her. A harsh northern climate. A ward society had already rejected, which meant she'd be fighting battles on multiple fronts. And the certainty that she'd be trading one kind of isolation for another. But at least the second kind came with power. Her mother was horrified when Alara finally told her about the offer. Absolutely not, Margaret Whitcomb said, her teacup rattling in its saucer. Duke Thornvale is barely civilized. He lives in that dreadful fortress like some medieval warlord, and the rumors about him are simply appalling. What rumors? Alara asked, though she could guess. Violence, cruelty. They say he killed a man in a border dispute with his bare hands. They say he defended his land from raiders, Mother. There's a difference. And the child, taking in his brother's bastard. The child's name is Thomas, Alara said quietly. And he's 7 years old, not responsible for the circumstances of his birth. Margaret set down her teacup with a sharp click. You cannot seriously be considering this. Alara, please. I know this season has been difficult, but there will be other opportunities, better opportunities. Will there? Elara met her mother's eyes. Name one man in London who wants to marry me. One. Her mother's face crumpled. Darling, I'm 24, Mother. I've had 3 seasons. 0 proposals. I've been called an Amazon, a blue stocking, and too clever by half. Last week, Cedric Hale compared me to a draft horse. In public. Elara's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. So please, tell me about these better opportunities, because from where I'm standing, I'm looking at a future as a maiden aunt living on family charity and attending other women's weddings until I die. That's not fair. It's perfectly fair. I don't fit their definition of womanhood, and I never will. Duke Thornvale is offering me something else, something that might actually use the brain God gave me instead of asking me to hide it. Margaret looked at her daughter for a long moment. There was grief in her eyes. Understanding, too. You've already decided, haven't you? I think so. Then I won't stop you. Margaret reached across the table and gripped Elara's hand. But please, darling, be careful. Men like Thornvale, they don't change. If he's offering you a business arrangement, that's all it will ever be. I know. And you're all right with that? Elara thought about Cedric's laughter, about the endless balls spent invisible against walls, about the slow suffocation of trying to make herself acceptable. I'm all right with that, she said. 3 days later, she sent a note to Belgrave Square. Duke Thornvale, I accept your terms. When do we leave for the north? The response arrived within hours. Miss Whitcomb, tomorrow. Pack warmly. The fortress is not London. They were married in a registry office with 2 witnesses pulled in from the street. No white dress, no flowers, no weeping mothers or proud fathers, just a legal document and 2 signatures, witnessed by a startled clerk and a woman who'd been passing by on her way to the butcher. The whole thing took 17 minutes. Well, Alaric said afterward, standing on the steps of the registry office in the thin autumn sunlight. That's done. Yes, Elara agreed. She was wearing a traveling dress in deep green, practical and warm. Her wedding outfit. Very romantic. He glanced at her sharply, but her face was neutral. After a moment, his mouth twitched. We established the parameters. Romance was not included. No, it wasn't. Regrets already? Ask me again when I've seen this fortress you keep mentioning. They took a private carriage north. The journey took 4 days, and with each mile, the landscape grew wilder. The manicured estates and rolling hills around London gave way to rougher country. Stone walls instead of hedges, moorland instead of gardens. The sky seemed bigger up here, clouds moving fast and low. Alaric spent most of the journey reading reports and making notes in a leather journal. He wasn't chatty. Elara appreciated that. She stared out the window and tried not to think about what she'd done. On the 3rd night, they stopped at an inn. Separate rooms, obviously. Elara lay in bed listening to rain hammer the roof and wondered if she'd made a catastrophic mistake. Second thoughts? Alaric asked the next morning over breakfast. 3rd or 4th by now, Elara admitted. But I'm still here. Fair enough. On the 4th day, they reached Thornvale. The fortress rose from the landscape like something carved by violence. It wasn't a castle in the fairy tale sense, no towers or turrets or romantic battlements. It was stone and iron and brutal functionality built into a cliff face overlooking the sea. The walls were thick as houses. The windows were narrow. It looked like it had been designed to withstand sieges, not host garden parties. It was magnificent. Home, Alaric said dryly as the carriage rolled through the massive gate. Try to contain your enthusiasm. Elara stepped down into the courtyard and looked up at the gray stone walls. Wind screamed in from the ocean, carrying salt and the promise of storms. It was cold, harsh, uncompromising. She loved it immediately. Your Grace. A woman appeared from one of the side buildings, older, perhaps 50, with iron gray hair and a face like granite. Welcome home. And this must be the new Duchess. Mrs. Blackwood, my housekeeper, Alaric said. She runs this place. Listen to her advice. She knows more about the fortress than I do. Mrs. Blackwood's eyes were assessing, not unkind. Your chambers are prepared, Your Grace. I've had fires lit. It takes time to warm these old stones. Dinner will be at 7. His Grace prefers to eat in the small dining room, not the formal hall. Thank you, Alara said. She met the housekeeper's gaze directly. I appreciate your work in preparing for my arrival. I'm sure I'll have many questions in the coming days. Something flickered in Mrs. Blackwood's expression. Approval, maybe? I'm at your disposal, Your Grace. And the boy? Alara asked, turning to Alaric. Thomas, where is he? His rooms are in the east wing, 3rd floor. Alaric's expression was carefully neutral. He's shy. Doesn't warm to people easily. You'll need patience. Noted, Alaric gestured toward the main building. I'll have Mrs. Blackwood show you to your chambers. I need to meet with my steward about the harvest yields. We'll discuss household matters after dinner. He strode off without ceremony, coat flaring in the wind. Alara watched him go, then turned to find Mrs. Blackwood studying her. He's not cruel, the housekeeper said quietly. In case you're wondering, hard, yes, demanding, but not cruel. And he cares for the boy, though he doesn't know how to show it. Thank you for telling me. You're not what I expected. I'm rarely what anyone expects, Alara said. Is that going to be a problem? Mrs. Blackwood's stern face creased into something almost like a smile. Not for me, Your Grace. Come, let me show you your rooms before you freeze solid. The Duchess's chambers were massive, a suite of interconnected rooms with high ceilings and windows that looked out over the cliffs. There was a sitting room, a dressing room, a bedroom with a bed large enough to sleep 4 people. Everything was old but well maintained, the kind of furniture that had been built to last centuries. The Duke's chambers connect through that door, Mrs. Blackwood said, pointing to a heavy wooden door on the far wall, though it hasn't been opened in years. His Grace's wife, the first Duchess, died 8 years ago in childbirth. He's kept her rooms exactly as they were. Alara's chest tightened. He didn't mention a first wife. He doesn't mention her to anyone. Mrs. Blackwood moved to the fireplace, adjusting the logs. It's not my place to speak of it, but you should know, whatever agreement you made with His Grace, there are ghosts here. Old griefs. He's not easy. I noticed. And young Master Thomas. The housekeeper's expression softened. Poor child. He barely speaks, flinches at loud noises. He's been here a year, and I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen him smile. What happened to him? His mother died when he was 5. Fever. He was living in the village with her family, poor folk, but decent enough. Then word got out about who his father was, and she shook her head. Bastard children aren't treated well anywhere, but in a small village? They made his life hell, called him names, threw stones. When His Grace found out, he brought the boy here immediately. But the damage was done. Alara felt rage kindle in her chest again, that cold, white-hot anger. Where is he now? In his rooms, I expect. He hides there most days, has his meals brought up. Not anymore, Mrs. Blackwood raised an eyebrow. Your Grace? If I'm to be his guardian, I need to meet him properly, not through closed doors. Alara straightened her spine. Take me to him, now if possible. Are you certain? His Grace usually handles. His Grace is not his mother, Alara said quietly, and the boy needs one, don't you think? For the first time since Alara had arrived, Mrs. Blackwood smiled fully. This way, Your Grace. Thomas's rooms were at the end of a long corridor in the east wing. The door was closed, but not locked. Mrs. Blackwood knocked gently. Master Thomas, the new Duchess would like to meet you. Silence. Alara stepped forward. Thomas? My name is Alara. May I come in? More silence. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. I suppose. She opened the door. The room was sparse but comfortable. A bed, a desk, shelves lined with books, a window that looked out over the sea. And in the corner, curled up in a chair far too large for him, was a small boy with dark hair and enormous gray eyes. He looked terrified. Alara's heart cracked. She didn't rush toward him or try to embrace him or deploy any of the cloying sweetness adults usually used with frightened children. Instead, she sat down on the floor, back against the wall, several feet away from his chair. "Hello?" she said calmly. Thomas stared at her. "You're sitting on the floor." "I am. Is that against the rules?" "No." "Good. Because I've been in a carriage for 4 days and I'm tired of sitting properly." Alara adjusted her skirts around her. "You must be Thomas." The boy nodded slowly. "I'm told you like books." Another nod. "What are you reading currently?" Thomas glanced at the book in his lap. "Tales of King Arthur." "Ah. Which knight is your favorite?" I don't know." "Fair enough. I always thought Gawain was underrated. Everyone focuses on Lancelot, but Gawain was loyal to the end. That matters more than fancy sword skills, in my opinion." Thomas's eyes flickered with something that might have been interest. "You've read it?" "Several times. My father had a library. I spent most of my childhood there instead of learning to embroider like I was supposed to." "Ladies are supposed to embroider?" "According to some people. I was terrible at it. Stabbed myself with the needle more often than the fabric." Alara smiled. "I'm better with words than needles." "The Duke brought you here to be his wife." "He did." Do you want to be here?" The question was small and scared, and Alara understood immediately what he was really asking. "Are you going to leave like everyone else?" "Yes," she said firmly. "I want to be here. This place is interesting, and I've heard there's a very intelligent boy living here who needs someone to argue about Arthur and his knights with." Thomas's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Mrs. Blackwood doesn't know about Arthur. Tragic oversight on her part. Lucky I arrived then." The boy studied her with those enormous eyes. "You're very tall." "I am. Does that bother you?" "No, just different." "Different isn't always bad." "People say it is." Alara's chest tightened again. "People say a lot of stupid things, especially when they're scared of things they don't understand." Thomas looked down at his book. "They called me bastard, in the village, threw mud at me, said I was cursed because my mother wasn't married." "Then they were cruel and ignorant," Alara said quietly. "You're not cursed. You're just a boy who lost his mother too soon. That's not your fault." "The Duke says that too." "Then the Duke and I agree on something. That's promising." Thomas almost smiled again. "He's very scary sometimes." "He is rather intense," Alara admitted, "but I don't think he means to be frightening. I think he's just not very good with words. Some people are better with actions." "What actions?" "Well, he brought you here, didn't he? Away from people who hurt you. That's an action that matters." Thomas considered this. "I suppose." "Would you like to hear something true?" Alara asked. The boy nodded. "I didn't come here because I was happy in London. I came because people there were cruel to me too. Different reasons than yours, but cruel nonetheless. So we're both starting new lives in this fortress. Both trying to figure out where we belong." She met his eyes. "Maybe we can figure it out together." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then, Would you read to me sometimes? If you're not too busy being a duchess." Alara felt tears prick her eyes, but kept them back. "I would be honored." "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," she agreed. She stood, dusting off her skirts. At the door, she paused. "Thomas? One more thing." "Yes?" "You're not alone anymore. Remember that." She left before he could see her crying. Dinner that night was awkward. The small dining room was still absurdly large by normal standards, with a table that could seat 20. Alaric sat at one end. Alara sat at the other. Between them was roughly 10 feet of polished wood and geometric inevitability. "This is ridiculous," Alara said. Alaric looked up from his plate. "Excuse me?" The distance. We're not negotiating a treaty." She stood, picked up her plate and wine glass, and moved to the chair adjacent to his. "There. Better." He blinked at her. "You're not concerned with protocol." "I left protocol in London." Alara cut into her roast. "How was your meeting with the steward?" "Productive. Harvest yields are down 12%, but that was expected given the late frost." He paused. "You don't need to make conversation. I'm not offended by silence." "What if I prefer conversation?" "Then I'll adapt." They ate in silence for a moment. Then Alara said, I met Thomas. Alaric's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Already? Mrs. Blackwood took me to his rooms. We talked, briefly. He talked to you? There was something in Alaric's voice, surprise, maybe even hope. A bit. He's frightened, lonely, but he's clever, and he has good taste in literature. He barely speaks to me, Alaric admitted. I brought him here. I've given him safety, education, everything he needs, but he looks at me like I'm going to hurt him. You're very large and very intense, Alara said gently, and he's a traumatized 7-year-old. You probably terrify him. That's not my intention. I know, but intention doesn't always translate to result. She set down her fork. I told him I'd read to him tomorrow. Is that acceptable? Of course. Whatever helps. Alaric's expression was difficult to read. You're good with him. I'm patient, and I remember what it's like to feel like you don't fit anywhere. They finished the meal in companionable silence. When the plates were cleared, Alaric poured them both brandy. This arrangement, he said abruptly. I want to establish something clearly. Alara's stomach clenched. Yes? You have complete authority over Thomas's upbringing and the household management. I won't countermand your decisions unless they threaten safety or finances. You wanted power. You have it. Use it. Just like that? Just like that. He met her eyes. I don't make offers I don't intend to honor. You're the Duchess now. Act like it. Alara felt something unfurl in her chest. Trust, maybe. Or the beginning of it. One more thing, Alaric said, about the personal aspects of this marriage. Her stomach clenched again. Yes? I won't force intimacy on you, ever. If that dimension develops naturally, fine. If it doesn't, also fine. This fortress has separate chambers for a reason. No expectations. No obligations beyond what we agreed. The relief was so intense she almost laughed. Thank you. Don't thank me for basic decency. You'd be surprised how rare that is. Alaric's scarred face arranged itself into something grim. No, I wouldn't. They drank their brandy and watched the fire crackle. Outside, the northern wind screamed against the stones, and the sea crashed against the cliffs, and Alara Thornvale, no longer Whitcomb, felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, not yet, but possibility. The first month at Thornvale was brutal. Not because of cruelty or neglect. Alaric kept his word about autonomy, and the staff treated her with cautious respect. But the fortress itself was a living challenge. The wind never stopped. The cold seeped through stone walls 2 feet thick. The stairs were steep and unforgiving. The corridors twisted like a maze designed by someone who hated visitors. Alara mapped it all methodically, notebook in hand, sketching layouts and noting which passages led where. Mrs. Blackwood watched this with barely concealed approval. The last Duchess never bothered learning the layout, the housekeeper said one morning as Alara stood in the main hall, counting doorways. Said it was the servant's job to know such things. The last Duchess sounds like she wasted opportunities, Alara replied, not looking up from her notes. How many storerooms on the lower level? 7, though 3 are half empty since the supply routes changed. Alara glanced up. Changed how? His Grace's merchants used to come through the eastern pass, but bandits made it too dangerous. Now they take the coastal route, which adds 5 days and costs more. We've been making do with smaller inventories. Show me the supply ledgers. Mrs. Blackwood blinked. Your Grace? The household accounts, food, medicine, textiles, everything. I want to see what we're spending and where it's going. That's, His Grace usually handles... His Grace is managing border disputes and harvest yields. I'm managing the household. Those were the terms. Alara closed her notebook. Unless he's rescinded that authority? No, Your Grace. I'll have the ledgers sent to your chambers. Thank you. And Mrs. Blackwood? Alara softened her tone. I'm not trying to undermine how things have been done. I'm trying to understand them so I can help. If my method seems strange, tell me. I'd rather be corrected than ignorant. The housekeeper's stern expression cracked into something warmer. You're different from what I expected, Your Grace. So I've been told. That afternoon, Ilara sat in her chambers surrounded by leather-bound ledgers, tracing supply routes and cost fluctuations with the same intensity she'd once used to track London gossip. The numbers told stories, where resources flowed, where they dried up, which merchants were reliable and which were bleeding the estate dry with inflated prices. She was 3 hours into the work when someone knocked. "Come in," she called, not looking up. The door opened. Footsteps. Small, hesitant. "Thomas?" Ilara glanced up to find the boy hovering in the doorway, clutching his Arthur book. "Is it time for reading already?" "No, He looked at the papers spread around her. "Are you busy?" "Never too busy for you." She closed the nearest ledger. "What's on your mind?" "I finished the Arthur book." "Already? That was fast." "I read at night when I can't sleep." Thomas moved closer, still cautious, like approaching a half-wild animal. "Do you have more books?" "I brought a few from London. Nothing as exciting as Knight's, I'm afraid. Mostly histories and agricultural treatises. Riveting stuff." "What's a treatise?" "A very long, very boring explanation of something the author thinks is important, usually written by men who like the sound of their own voice." She smiled. "Why? Are you interested in agriculture?" "I don't know, maybe." He sat down on the floor near her chair, cross-legged. "What are all these papers?" "Household accounts, numbers showing what the fortress spends and earns." Thomas frowned. "That sounds boring." "It is, but also useful. These numbers tell me things, like how we're being overcharged for wool because our merchant knows we need it and we don't have other options. See?" She pointed to a column. "The price increased 30% in 6 months, but the quality didn't improve. That's not fair." "No, it's not. So I need to figure out how to fix it." The boy studied the ledger with genuine curiosity. "Could you find a different merchant?" "Possibly, but that means establishing new trade routes, vetting suppliers, negotiating contracts. It's complicated." "The Duke would know how to do it." "The Duke is busy defending our borders from raiders. I don't want to burden him with household problems if I can solve them myself." Thomas looked at her with those enormous gray eyes. "You're not like other ladies." "So I've been told. Is that bad?" "No, just different." He paused. "The ladies in the village used to gossip. All they talked about was dresses and who was marrying who. They never talked about numbers or merchants or anything important." "Well, I'm terrible at gossip, always have been." "Good," Thomas said firmly. "Gossip is mean." Ilara's heart squeezed. This child had been destroyed by gossip, by whispers about his birth and his worth. Of course he hated it. "You're absolutely right," she said. "It is mean, and usually stupid besides." They sat together in companionable silence for a moment. Then Thomas said, "Do you miss London?" "No." "Really?" "Really. London was full of people who pretended to like me while whispering insults the moment I turned around. At least here, if someone dislikes me, they'll probably say it to my face. I prefer honesty." "The Duke is very honest." "He is. Brutally so, sometimes." "He's not very good at talking," Thomas said quietly. "To me, I mean. He tries, but he always looks uncomfortable, like he doesn't know what to say. I think he cares very much but doesn't know how to show it. Some people express love through actions, not words." "Like bringing me here?" "Exactly like that. He pulled you out of a terrible situation and gave you safety. That's love, even if he doesn't say the word." Thomas absorbed this. "Do you think he'll ever like me? Really like me? Not just tolerate me because he has to?" Ilara's throat tightened. "Oh, Thomas, he already does. I've seen how he talks about you when you're not around. There's pride in his voice. Worry, too. He wants to protect you so badly, but he doesn't know how to be gentle. It's not in his nature." "Were you scared of him when you first came?" "A little, but mostly I was impressed. He's the first person who ever told me the truth without wrapping it in politeness. That was refreshing." "You married him even though he's scary?" "I married him because he offered me something no one else would. Respect. He didn't want me to be smaller or quieter or more decorative. He wanted me to be useful, capable." She met Thomas's eyes. "And he brought me to you, which makes the whole arrangement worthwhile." The boy's face flushed. Really? Really? Thomas looked down at his book, then back up at her. Would you teach me about the numbers, the household accounts? I want to understand how things work. Alara felt something warm bloom in her chest. I would love that, but only if you teach me more about King Arthur. Deal? Deal. They shook hands solemnly, and Alara thought, this is what I came for, this moment, this child trusting me enough to ask questions. It made every humiliation in London worth it. That evening, Alaric returned from a week-long border inspection covered in mud and exhaustion. Alara encountered him in the main hall, where he was stripping off his riding gloves and barking orders at his steward. And tell Carver I want those patrols doubled. The tracks we found were fresh, no more than 2 days old. If those raiders think they can... He stopped mid-sentence when he saw her. Alara. Welcome back. You look terrible. His mouth twitched. Always so flattering. I prefer accurate. Have you eaten? Not since this morning. Then come, I'll have Mrs. Blackwood prepare something. She started toward the dining room, then paused. Actually, no. Come to my sitting room instead. The dining hall is absurd for 2 people, and you look like you need to sit down before you fall down. I'm fine. You're swaying. Don't argue. She turned to the steward. Have food sent to the Duchess's chambers. And hot water for washing. He smells like a stable. The steward's eyes went wide, but Alaric just laughed. An actual laugh, rusty from disuse. You're very bossy. You gave me authority over the household. I'm exercising it. Now move. 20 minutes later, Alaric sat in one of her sitting room chairs, cleaned up and working his way through bread, cheese, and roasted chicken while Alara poured tea. Thomas asked about you today, she said. Wanted to know if you'd be back soon. Alaric's hand paused. He did? He's warming to the idea of you, slowly. He told me you're scary but probably not cruel. High praise from a 7-year-old. It is, actually, considering where he started. Alara sat down across from him. He's smart, Alaric, really smart. Asked me to teach him about household accounts because he wanted to understand how things work. He's not even 8. So, I was reading military histories at 8. Intelligence doesn't wait for adulthood. Alaric studied her over his teacup. You're good for him. I'm trying. She hesitated. He asked me if you'd ever really like him, not just tolerate him. Something flickered across Alaric's scarred face. Pain, maybe. What did you tell him? That you already do, that you're just not skilled at showing affection. She met his eyes. Was I wrong? No. He set down the cup. I care for the boy more than I know how to express. His father was my brother, younger by 3 years, charming and reckless in equal measure. When he died in that riding accident, I found out about Thomas through a letter from the boy's mother. She never asked for money or recognition. Just wanted me to know Marcus had left someone behind. And when she died? I inherited a terrified 5-year-old who'd been living in hell. Alaric's jaw tightened. I should have checked on them sooner, should have provided support while she was alive. But I was dealing with border conflicts and didn't think... He broke off. And now I have a child who looks at me like I'm one wrong move away from becoming a monster. He doesn't think you're a monster. He thinks you're intimidating. There's a difference. Is there? Yes, monsters inspire fear and nothing else. You inspire fear and curiosity and a desperate hope that maybe, possibly, you might care about him. Alara leaned forward. He wants your approval, Alaric. That's why he freezes around you. He's trying so hard to be good enough that he can't relax. What do I do? Talk to him. Not about duty or safety or proper behavior, just talk. Ask him about his books. Tell him about your day. Make mistakes in front of him so he knows perfection isn't required. Alaric looked at her like she'd suggested he dance naked through the courtyard. I don't make small talk. Then make large talk. Tell him stories about Marcus, about the raids you're dealing with. Treat him like a person whose opinions matter, not a fragile thing that might break. And if I fail, then you fail, and you try again. She smiled. That's what parents do. They mess up and keep trying anyway. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm glad you're here. The words were simple but felt enormous. So am I, Alara said. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Alara spent mornings with Thomas, reading, teaching him basic accounting, exploring the fortress grounds when weather permitted. Afternoons belonged to household management, where she systematically worked through every ledger and supply contract, looking for inefficiencies. She found dozens. The wool merchant was indeed overcharging. The grain supplier was short-waiting deliveries. 3 of the tenant farmers were behind on rent because the land they worked was too poor to yield proper crops, but no one had bothered to investigate why or reassign them to better plots. Alara made lists, drew maps, calculated costs, and slowly, carefully, began making changes. "We're switching wool suppliers," she told Mrs. Blackwood one morning. The housekeeper frowned. "But we've used Merchant Carr for years, and he's been robbing us for years. I found a supplier in the next county who'll provide better quality for 20% less. I've already negotiated the contract." "When did you have time to do that?" "Last week when Alaric was away. I rode out with 2 guards, met with the merchant, inspected the inventory myself." Alara showed her the samples. "Feel this wool, then compare it to what we've been receiving. It's not even close." Mrs. Blackwood fingered both pieces, her expression shifting to anger. "That bastard! Indeed, so we're done with him. His Grace might not approve of you making such decisions without consultation, then he can tell me himself. But until he does, I'm fixing what's broken." Alara's voice was firm. "This is my household now. I won't watch it bleed money through incompetence or greed." The housekeeper's stern face creased into a smile. "You know what, Your Grace? I think you're exactly what this place needed." Not everyone agreed. Merchant Carr appeared at the fortress gates 3 days later, demanding an audience. Alaric was away again, dealing with a skirmish near the eastern border, so Alara met the man in the receiving hall. Carr was 50-ish, well-dressed, with the kind of smooth confidence that came from years of getting his way. He bowed with just enough respect to seem polite while making his disdain clear. "Your Grace, I understand there's been some confusion about our arrangement." "No confusion. I'm terminating our contract." Alara remained standing, arms crossed. "You've been overcharging for inferior product. We're moving to a different supplier." "I see. And does His Grace know you're making such decisions?" "His Grace gave me complete authority over household management. Are you questioning his judgment?" Carr's smile tightened. "Of course not. However, business relationships aren't built overnight. Your predecessor understood the value of established connections." "My predecessor is dead. I'm not." Alara took a step closer. "Let me be clear, Merchant Carr. I've reviewed every contract you've had with this estate for the past 5 years. You've systematically increased prices while decreasing quality. You've shorted deliveries and charged for goods never received. You've exploited this household's trust." "That's a serious accusation. It's a factual one. I have the receipts, the weight records, the quality assessments. Would you like me to present them to His Grace when he returns? Or perhaps to the Regional Trade Council?" Carr's face went red. "You don't understand how business works, Your Grace. These arrangements are complicated." "I understand perfectly. You found a household without proper oversight and took advantage. That ends now." She moved toward the door, dismissing him. "You're no longer welcome on Thornvale lands. If you attempt to contact any of our tenants or interfere with our new suppliers, I'll ensure every merchant in the north knows exactly how you conduct business." "You're making a mistake." "No, you made the mistake. You assumed I'd be too ignorant or too weak to notice what you were doing." Alara opened the door. "Guards, escort Merchant Carr to the gate. He won't be returning." After he left, Mrs. Blackwood appeared from the shadows. "That was magnificent, Your Grace." "That was necessary. How much time before word reaches every merchant in the region that the new Duchess is unreasonable and difficult?" "About 3 days, I'd estimate." "Good. Let them know. Maybe they'll be honest in their dealings instead of testing me first." The housekeeper laughed outright. "His Grace is going to be very entertained by this." Alara smiled grimly. "I hope so." When Alaric returned 2 days later, he summoned her to his study immediately. Alara went with her spine straight and her ledgers under her arm, ready for whatever criticism he planned to deliver. He was standing by the window when she entered, still in riding clothes, staring out at the courtyard. You fired Carr, he said without turning around. I terminated a contract with a merchant who was stealing from us. Yes. He sent a message, called you impulsive, and claimed you didn't understand the complexity of northern trade relationships. Elara's jaw tightened. And? Alaric turned around. His expression was unreadable. And I sent him a reply saying if he ever questions my wife's intelligence again, I'll personally ensure he never does business in this region. The tension drained from Elara's shoulders. Oh. Show me your evidence. She spread the ledgers across his desk, walking him through the price increases, the quality degradation, the shorted shipments. Alaric listened without interrupting, his scarred face growing progressively darker. How long has this been happening? He asked finally. 5 years at minimum, possibly longer. I haven't reviewed the archives yet. And the new supplier? Better quality, lower price, reliable delivery schedule. I've already received the first shipment. Mrs. Blackwood confirmed it exceeds our previous standard. Alaric was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I should have caught this years ago. You were busy defending borders and managing estates. That's why you needed someone handling the household. I needed someone competent handling the household. You're overqualified. He almost smiled. Carr won't be the last to test you. The northern merchants are a suspicious bunch. They'll assume you're easy to manipulate because you're a woman from London. Then they'll learn otherwise. They will. Alaric studied her. You're enjoying this. I am. Is that a problem? Not for me. I'm just surprised. Why? You offered me authority. Did you think I wouldn't use it? I thought you'd be more cautious. Test the waters before diving in. Elara closed the ledgers. I've spent my entire life being cautious, measuring every word, every action, trying not to offend anyone. I'm done with that. You gave me power. I'm wielding it. Good. Alaric's expression was difficult to read. The estate finances need similar attention. The steward is competent but lacks vision. Would you be willing to review the agricultural accounts? The entire estate? Why not? You've already proven you're better at this than anyone I could hire. Elara felt something fierce and bright kindle in her chest. Yes, absolutely yes. Then it's yours. I'll have the records sent to your chambers. He paused. One more thing. Thomas asked if he could observe the border patrols. Did he? Apparently you told him I do important work defending the estate, and he wants to understand what that means. Alaric looked uncomfortable. I don't know if it's appropriate for a child. He's trying to connect with you, to understand your world. Elara considered. What if you started small? Show him maps of the territory. Explain the strategic challenges. Let him ask questions. Then, if he's still interested, maybe a supervised observation from a safe distance. You think that would work? I think he's desperate for your attention and approval. If you share something you care about, he'll feel valued. Isn't that worth trying? Alaric nodded slowly. I'll talk to him. Good. And Alaric? Yes? Try not to terrify him. Speak like you're talking to a person, not a subordinate. His mouth twitched. You're very demanding. You married me for my strengths, not my compliance. I did, didn't I? For the first time since she'd arrived, Alaric looked genuinely amused. I'm starting to remember why. That evening, Elara found Thomas in the library, a room she'd only recently discovered, tucked away in the south tower. It was smaller than her father's library, but better stocked, with volumes on everything from military history to agricultural science to medieval poetry. Thomas was curled up in a window seat, reading by lamplight. New book? Elara asked. He looked up, startled, then smiled. You found the library. Finally. Why didn't you tell me about it sooner? I thought you knew, Mrs. Blackwood says duchesses always know about libraries. This duchess was apparently blind. Elara sat down beside him. What are you reading? History of the Northern Campaigns. It's about battles. He showed her the cover. The Duke gave it to me. Did he? He came to my room this afternoon, said if I wanted to understand his work, I should start by learning the context. Thomas's voice was soft with wonder. We talked for almost an hour. He showed me maps and explained about raiders and trade routes and why the mountain passes matter. And? And he didn't talk down to me. He explained things like I could actually understand. The boy's eyes were bright. He said I could watch patrol training next week if I wanted, from the walls, where it's safe. Alara's chest felt too full. That sounds wonderful. He's not as scary when he's explaining things. He gets sort of focused, like the whole world narrows down to just the subject he's talking about. That's a good description. Thomas hesitated. Do you think he actually likes having me here, or is he just being dutiful because he has to? I think, Alara said carefully, that he cares more than he knows how to show. And I think having you here makes him try to be better, which means you matter to him very much. You really think so? I know so. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm glad you came here. I don't think he would have talked to me like that before you arrived. You make him different. Or maybe I just helped him see what was already there. Maybe. Thomas leaned against her shoulder, the first physical contact he'd initiated. Can we still do our lessons? Even though he's teaching me things too? Of course. We'll both teach you. Between the two of us, you'll be impossibly educated. The boy laughed, actually laughed, clear and genuine. Alara closed her eyes and thought, this is what I wanted. Not romance, not grand passion. Just this, purpose, usefulness, connection. A child who trusts me, a man who respects my mind, a place where I can be fully myself without apology. It was more than she'd ever hoped for in London. It was, in fact, everything. Winter came hard and fast to Thornvale. The wind turned vicious, carrying ice and salt spray that coated the fortress walls in frozen white. Snow piled in the courtyard faster than the staff could clear it. The sea churned gray and violent, smashing against the cliffs with sounds like thunder. Alara loved it. You're insane, Mrs. Blackwood said one morning, watching Alara return from a walk along the ramparts, face red from cold and hair wild from wind. No sane person enjoys this weather. I find it clarifying. Alara unwrapped her cloak, shaking off snow. Besides, I needed to check the northwestern tower. The wind damage looks worse than reported. That's the steward's job. The steward has enough to manage. I can climb stairs and assess stonework. She pulled off her gloves. We need repairs before spring, or that entire section will be compromised. I'll add it to the list. Add it to the top of the list. And tell the steward I want to review the defense maintenance budget. There's money allocated for repairs that never seem to get completed. Mrs. Blackwood smiled. You don't stop, do you? Should I? No, Your Grace. Keep going. By midwinter, Alara had completely reorganized the household operations. Supply contracts were renegotiated. Staff schedules were optimized. The estate finances were consolidated into a system that actually made sense. She'd even started a lending program for tenant farmers, offering low-interest loans for equipment and seed in exchange for first refusal on crops. Alaric reviewed her work one evening, reading through reports while she worked on correspondence at the other end of his desk. They'd fallen into this routine, working in companionable silence, occasionally discussing problems or asking for input. It was, Alara thought, the most functional relationship she'd ever witnessed. This lending program, Alaric said suddenly, it's brilliant. She looked up. You think so? The farmers get resources they need, we get first access to their yields, and everyone profits. Why didn't I think of this? Because you were focused on defense, different skill set. Still, I should have seen it. You see it now. That's what matters. Alara set down her pen. How are the border negotiations going? Slowly. The raiders want access to the southern pass in exchange for leaving our villages alone. I'm trying to determine if that's a real offer or a feint while they plan something worse. What does your instinct say? That they're testing me, seeing if I'll compromise. He rubbed his scarred jaw. The previous duke, my father, was brutal with raiders, showed no mercy. They learned to fear him, but fear only works if you're willing to back it up with violence. And you? I'm willing, but I'd prefer not to. Dead raiders don't negotiate. They also don't stop raiding. They just get replaced by angrier, more desperate ones. Alara considered this. What if you offered something else? Not the pass, but something they need more. Like what? Trade access. Most raiders turn to violence because they can't get goods through legitimate channels. What if you established a regulated market? They could buy what they need legally, you'd collect tariffs, and everyone avoids bloodshed. Alaric stared at her. That's actually viable. Of course it is. I'm very smart. You married me for my brain, remember? His laugh was genuine. I'm starting to think I got the better end of this arrangement. You absolutely did. They worked late into the night, Alara helping him sketch out a proposal for the raider clans while Alaric challenged her assumptions and refined the strategy. By the time they finished, the fire had burned down to embers, and the fortress was silent around them. I should let you sleep, Alaric said, stretching. We've been at this for hours. I'm not tired. Alara looked at the papers spread between them, maps, trade routes, resource assessments. This is the most alive I've felt in years. Running a fortress? Solving problems that matter, using my mind for something beyond party gossip and needlework. She met his eyes. Thank you for giving me this. You've earned it 10 times over. His expression was serious. I meant what I said earlier about getting the better end of the arrangement. You've transformed this place in 3 months. The household runs better. The finances are stable. Thomas is thriving. And you've given me a strategic mind to collaborate with. That's worth more than any dowry. Are you getting sentimental, Duke Thornvale? Stating facts, but his scarred face softened slightly. You've become essential. I want you to know that. The words hit harder than Alara expected. Essential. Not tolerated. Not accommodated. Essential. Good, she managed, because I'm not planning to leave. Something flickered in Alaric's dark eyes. Relief, maybe, or something deeper. But he just nodded and said, I'm counting on it. Spring arrived with the subtlety of a knife fight. The snow melted in violent torrents, flooding the lower roads and turning the courtyard into a mud pit that took 3 weeks to drain properly. The wind shifted from cutting to merely aggressive, and with the thaw came news that made Alaric's expression turn to granite. Naval blockade, he said, standing at the map table in his study. His finger traced the coastline south of Thornvale. 3 warships positioned here. They're stopping our merchant vessels before they reach port. Alara leaned over the map, studying the positions. Whose ships? Duke Ravencroft's. Officially, he claims they're enforcing tariff regulations. Unofficially, he's trying to strangle our trade until I agree to cede him control of the northern timber rights. Can he do that? He can do whatever he wants until someone stops him. The Crown won't intervene. They're too busy with continental politics to care about northern trade disputes. Alaric's jaw was tight. We have 6 vessels at sea right now carrying textiles, grain, metalwork. If they can't reach port, we lose everything. And if word spreads that Thornvale can't protect its merchants, no one will trade with us again. What are your options? Direct confrontation. Send our own warships to break the blockade. He didn't sound enthusiastic. Problem is, Ravencroft has more ships, better armed. We'd lose. So we can't fight. Not effectively. Alara studied the map, her mind already working through alternatives. The coastline here was treacherous, rocks, shallow waters, unpredictable currents. She'd spent the winter reviewing every geographical survey she could find, memorizing terrain as part of understanding the estate's strategic position. What about the Serpent's Channel? She asked. Alaric looked up sharply. What about it? It's shallow water between these 2 headlands. She traced it with her finger. Too dangerous for warships. But merchant vessels have smaller drafts. Could they navigate it? In theory, but no one uses the Serpent's Channel. The rocks have torn apart dozens of ships over the years. It's suicide. What if it's not? Alara pulled over the depth charts she'd been studying weeks ago for completely different reasons. Look, at high tide there's a navigable passage here, narrow but possible. If our captains knew the route precisely, timed the tides correctly, posted lookouts for rocks. You're suggesting we route 6 merchant vessels through one of the most dangerous passages on the northern coast. I'm suggesting we route them around a blockade that will definitely destroy us if we do nothing. Alaric stared at the charts. If even 1 ship founders, we lose everything aboard. Cargo, crew, reputation. and I'd be responsible for sending men to their deaths. And if we try to fight Ravencroft's warships, we lose ship's men and cargo anyway, just more dramatically. So the question is whether we lose by doing nothing, lose by fighting, or risk everything on an unconventional route that might actually work. Alara met his eyes. What would your father have done? Fought, lost men, made it so costly that Ravencroft would think twice next time. And what will you do? Alaric was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I'll consider your proposal, but I need to consult with the harbor master and the senior captains. This isn't a decision I can make alone. Fair enough. When? Tomorrow. They're already en route for the quarterly trade meeting. He looked at her with something like respect. You've been studying naval routes. I've been studying everything about this estate. That's my job. Your job was managing the household. The household is part of the estate. The estate depends on trade. Trade requires understanding logistics and geography and risk assessment. She smiled slightly. You told me I had authority. I took you at your word. So you did. Alaric rolled up the charts. Be prepared to present this to the captains tomorrow. They won't like being told their strategy by someone who's never captained a ship. Will you support the proposal? If I think it's viable, yes. If I think it's suicide, no. His expression was serious. I won't sacrifice lives to prove a point, Alara. Not even to win. I wouldn't ask you to. The meeting the next day was brutal. 5 ship captains crowded into Alaric's study, weathered men with storm-scarred faces and voices rough from years of shouting over wind. They listened to Alara's proposal with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. The Serpent's Channel killed my brother, Captain Thorne said flatly. Ripped his ship apart on rocks that appeared out of nowhere. You're asking us to sail our vessels straight into a graveyard. I'm asking you to navigate carefully at high tide with proper depth charts and experienced pilots. Alara kept her voice calm. The rocks that killed your brother are marked on these surveys. We know where they are. We can avoid them. Surveys are one thing, reality is another. Water moves, currents shift. One miscalculation and we're all drowning. And one more week of blockade means bankruptcy, Alara countered. Ravencroft isn't going to withdraw. He wants to bleed this estate dry. Every day we wait, he wins. Captain Reed, the oldest of the group, spoke up. What does His Grace think? All eyes turned to Alaric, who'd been standing silently by the window. I think, he said slowly, that the Duchess is right about our strategic position. We can't break the blockade by force. We can't wait it out. That leaves unconventional options. He moved to the map table. But Captain Thorne is also right. The Serpent's Channel is dangerous. I won't order anyone through it. I'm asking for volunteers. Volunteers to commit suicide? Thorne's voice was bitter. Volunteers to take a calculated risk. Alaric's tone was firm. If anyone chooses not to go, there will be no consequences, no shame, no penalties. You'll still have your positions, your contracts, your respect, but I need to know, if we attempt this, who's willing? Silence filled the room. Then Captain Reed said, I'll do it. Thorne rounded on him. You're mad. I'm practical. Her Grace has spent months learning this coastline. She knows these waters better than some of us, and she's never left land. Reed looked at Alara. Show me the route. The exact course. Every rock, every current, every depth measurement. If it's viable, I'll take my ship through. So will I, another captain said. Young woman, maybe 30, with scars across her knuckles. Captain Vane. My vessel has the shallowest draft in the fleet. If anyone can make it, I can. One by one, 3 more captains agreed. Only Thorne held out. I won't do it, he said finally. And I think you're all fools, but I won't stand in your way. Alaric nodded. Fair enough. Captain Thorne, you'll remain in harbor and coordinate emergency rescue if anything goes wrong. The rest of you, work with the Duchess on route planning. We sail in 3 days. After the captains left, Alaric turned to Alara. That was impressive. They think I'm insane. Probably, but they're also willing to follow your plan. That's what matters. He paused. If this fails, it won't. But if it does, the consequences fall on both of us. You understand that? Alara felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders. 6 ships, Dozens of crew members, cargo worth more than she'd earn in a lifetime, all dependent on her reading of charts and calculations of tides. "I understand," she said quietly, "and I still think it's our best chance." Then we proceed. The next 3 days were frantic. Alara worked with the captains, walking them through every detail of the proposed route. They argued, questioned, pushed back on her assumptions. She defended her calculations with the kind of fierce precision she'd once used to debate naval strategy at London dinner parties, the discussions that had gotten her labeled too clever for her own good. Here, that same intelligence was essential. Thomas watched the preparations with wide eyes, asking questions constantly. "Will they really sail through the dangerous water?" he asked on the second day, standing beside Alara as she reviewed charts for the 100th time. "They will." "What if they sink?" "Then we'll have failed, and people will die, and it will be partially my fault." Alara didn't soften the truth. Thomas deserved honesty. That's what leadership means sometimes, making decisions that could go terribly wrong. "Are you scared?" "Terrified." "But you're doing it anyway?" "Because doing nothing guarantees failure. At least this way we have a chance." Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The Duke trusts you. That means something." "Does it?" "He doesn't trust easily, but he listens to you, asks your opinion, looks at you like you're—" The boy struggled for words. "Like you're important, really important, not just there." Alara's throat tightened. "He's a good man. Better than he thinks he is." "So are you. Better than you think." She pulled the boy into a hug, something she rarely did, and felt him relax against her. "Thank you," she whispered. "Will you tell me what happens? After the ships sail?" "Every detail. I promise." On the morning of the departure, Alara stood on the harbor walls watching 5 vessels prepare to sail. The crews moved with practiced efficiency, loading supplies and checking rigging. The wind was steady from the northeast, good for the first leg of the journey. Alaric stood beside her, silent and tense. "Second thoughts?" she asked quietly. "Constant thoughts. All of them anxious." He glanced at her. "You?" "Same. But I've triple-checked everything. The tides are right. The weather is clear. If it's going to work, now is the time." "And if I'm sending these people to their deaths based on your calculations? Then you're sending them to their deaths based on your decision to trust me." Alara met his eyes. "We're in this together, Alaric. Whatever happens." He reached out and gripped her hand briefly, the first time he touched her outside of their formal wedding handshake. His palm was rough with calluses, warm against her cold fingers. "Together," he repeated. Then he released her hand and raised his voice. "Captains, make ready!" The ships departed in sequence, one after another, sails catching wind as they moved out of the harbor. Alara watched them disappear around the headland, carrying everything the estate had and everything she'd promised they could achieve. Then there was nothing to do but wait. The first ship was due back in 4 days. Alara spent that time in a state of controlled anxiety, working on household accounts to keep her mind occupied, but constantly calculating time and distance in the back of her thoughts. Thomas stuck close to her, reading silently while she worked, offering his presence as comfort. "You're fidgeting," he observed on the 3rd day. "I'm calculating." "You've been calculating for 3 hours. At some point you have to stop and trust the work you already did." Alara looked at the 8-year-old who was somehow wiser than half the adults she'd known. "When did you get so smart?" "I had a good teacher," he smiled. "The ships will make it. Your plan was good." "You don't know that." "Neither do you, so we might as well believe the better option." On the 4th day, Captain Reed's ship appeared on the horizon. Alara was in her chambers reviewing supply contracts when Mrs. Blackwood burst through the door without knocking, her face alight. "They're back! The first ship is back!" Alara dropped everything and ran, skirts gathered in her fists, propriety forgotten. She reached the harbor walls just as Reed's vessel glided into port, sails full and hull intact. The crew was grinning, laughing. One of them was singing. Captain Reed climbed onto the dock and looked up at where Alara stood on the wall. Then he swept into an exaggerated bow. "Your Grace, the Serpent's Channel sends its regards. We sailed through like we were on a pleasure cruise." Relief hit Alara so hard her knees went weak. She gripped the wall to stay upright. "Any damage?" she called down. "Not even a scratch. Your route was perfect. Tides exactly as predicted. Rocks precisely where you said they'd be. We passed close enough to touch them in some places, but we never struck bottom." Reed's grin was infectious. "I've been sailing these waters for 30 years. That was the most terrifying and most exhilarating run of my life." Over the next 2 days, the other 4 ships returned, all intact, all successful. Captain Vane reported they'd passed within a quarter-mile of Ravencroft's blockade, close enough to see the warships waiting in open water while the merchant vessels slipped through shallows too dangerous for military vessels to follow. "Ravencroft's admiral must have been apoplectic," Vane said, laughing, "watching us sail past with cargo that should have been trapped. I wish I could have seen his face." The fortress erupted in celebration. The kitchen staff prepared a feast. Wine flowed freely. Even Alaric smiled, a real smile, not his usual grim expression. That night, he found Alara in her chambers staring out at the dark sea. "You did it," he said quietly. "We did it. You trusted the plan." "I trusted you. There's a difference." He moved to stand beside her. "Do you understand what you've accomplished? You saved this estate. Not just the cargo, the entire operation. If we'd lost those ships, we'd be bankrupted. Finished, but you found a way through. I gambled. You strategized, and it worked." Alaric turned to face her fully. "I've commanded men in battle. I've negotiated treaties. I've managed armies and estates and political nightmares. But I would never have thought of that solution. The Serpent's Channel was just dangerous water to me. You saw it as an opportunity." Alara felt tears prick her eyes, but blinked them back. "Thank you for believing me. Thank you for being worth believing in." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the moon reflect on the water. And Alara thought about how strange it was that a marriage built on cold pragmatism had become this: partnership, respect, something that felt increasingly like friendship, maybe even something more. But she didn't say that. Not yet. Some things needed time to grow. The euphoria lasted exactly 2 weeks. Then a letter arrived from London, delivered by a courier who'd ridden hard enough to nearly kill his horse. The seal was from Lord Ashworth's estate, and the contents made Alaric's expression turn to stone. "What is it?" Alara asked, watching him read. "Social summons. Lord Ashworth is hosting his annual spring ball. He's specifically requested our attendance." Alaric's voice was flat. "Both of us." Alara's stomach dropped. "Why?" "Because Ashworth is dying and he knows it. This ball is his last chance to gather the northern nobility and position his nephew as the heir everyone should support. Politically, I can't refuse without implying I don't acknowledge the nephew's legitimacy." "But you don't have to bring me. The invitation specifically includes the Duchess of Thornvale. You're part of the equation now." He looked at her. "I'm sorry. I know you left London to escape this. Can we send regrets? And insult one of the most powerful lords in the north? Create enemies when we can't afford them?" Alaric shook his head. "We have to go. But we'll stay 1 night, 2 at most, then we leave." Alara felt the old anxiety creeping back. The ballrooms, the gossip, the crushing weight of judgment. But she'd faced naval blockades and risked everything on shallow water gambles. She could survive a ball. "When?" she asked. 3 weeks. Then we'll prepare." They traveled to London with minimal staff, just enough to be respectable without being ostentatious. Thomas stayed at Thornvale with Mrs. Blackwood, much to his disappointment, but Alara promised to bring him back a gift and tell him every detail. "Will people be mean to you?" he asked the morning of their departure. "Probably." "Will you let them?" Alara knelt down to his level. "I won't let them make me small again. That's a promise." "Good." Thomas hugged her fiercely. "You're the Duchess now. You outrank most of them. Remember that." "I will." The Ashworth estate was exactly as Alara remembered. Glittering, ostentatious, designed to display wealth in the most obvious ways possible. Carriages lined the drive, ladies in silk gowns floated through the gardens. Men in perfectly tailored coats discussed politics and horse racing with practiced boredom. Alara felt Alaric tense beside her as they entered the ballroom. "I hate these gatherings," he muttered. "That makes two of us. Stay close, and if anyone says anything untoward, I'll handle it. I'm not the same woman who left here 6 months ago." She wasn't. The woman who'd fled in humiliation had been desperately trying to fit a mold that would never accommodate her. The woman who entered now wore a dark blue gown that emphasized her height rather than trying to minimize it. Her hair was styled simply, practically. No apologies in her posture. The whispers started immediately. "Is that the Whitcomb girl? She married Thornvale? I heard he needed a broodmare for his bastard ward. Look at her shoulders, like a dock worker." Alara kept her spine straight and her expression neutral. Let them whisper. She'd saved an entire estate through strategy and courage. Their opinions meant exactly nothing. Then she saw him. Cedric Hale stood near the refreshment table, surrounded by his usual crowd of sycophants. He looked exactly as she remembered. Handsome, polished, charming, the kind of man who'd never experienced real consequences for his cruelty. He saw her, and his eyes widened fractionally. Then he smiled, that same crystalline smile that had once made her heart race. Now it just made her angry. "Alara," Alaric said quietly. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Whatever you're thinking of doing, he's not worth it." "I know." She turned away from Cedric deliberately. "Come on, let's find Lord Ashworth and pay our respects." They found him holding court in the library, looking frail and gray but still commanding. Ashworth greeted them with genuine warmth. "Thornvale! About time you dragged yourself south, and this must be your new Duchess." He studied Alara with sharp eyes. "I remember you, the Whitcomb girl. Heard you ran north rather suddenly." "I married, my lord, rather suddenly, but not unwillingly." "Ha! Good answer. And how are you finding fortress life?" "Challenging, rewarding, better than London. Most things are better than London." Ashworth waved them to seats. "I heard an interesting rumor about your merchant fleet. Something about navigating impossible waters and making Duke Ravencroft look like a fool." Alaric's expression remained neutral. "We found an alternative route." "The Serpent's Channel, I heard. That route killed a dozen ships over the years." Ashworth's eyes gleamed. "Whose idea was that?" "Mine," Alara said before Alaric could answer. "His Grace trusted my assessment of the navigation charts." "Did he now?" Ashworth looked between them with obvious interest. "Thornvale, you lucky bastard! You actually found a duchess with a brain. That's rarer than finding gold in a coal mine." "I'm aware of my fortune," Alaric said dryly. They spent an hour with Ashworth discussing trade and politics and the state of the Northern Territories. Alara contributed freely, no longer hiding her intelligence behind demure silence. If Ashworth was surprised by her knowledge, he hid it well. In fact, he seemed delighted. "You've got a treasure here, Thornvale," he said as they prepared to leave. "Don't waste her on household management. Put that mind to work on the estate." "Already done, my lord." "Smart man." Ashworth gripped Alara's hand briefly. "Duchess, thank you for the conversation. It's been years since anyone in this house gave me a proper debate about coastal economics. Come back before I die. I want to hear how the Serpent's Channel gambit plays out long term." "I'll do my best, my lord." They left the library and ventured back to the ballroom, where the dancing had started. Alara stood at the edge of the floor, watching the swirling couples with the same detachment she'd felt 6 months ago. Then someone spoke behind her. Well, Alara Whitcomb. Or should I say Thornvale now?" She turned slowly. Cedric Hale stood there, drink in hand, that familiar smirk playing around his mouth. "I have to say, I was surprised to hear about your marriage. Didn't think Thornvale would stoop to damaged goods." The insult landed, but Alara didn't flinch. "Cedric, still charming people with your wit, I see." "Someone has to maintain standards," he looked her up and down. "Though I suppose standards don't matter much in the northern wilderness. I hear Thornvale's fortress is barely civilized." "It's plenty civilized, just not in ways you'd recognize." "Ouch. The giantess has claws now." Cedric sipped his drink. "Tell me, how does it feel being married to a man who clearly settled for convenience? Everyone knows Thornvale needed someone to manage his bastard ward. You were just Available. Alaric appeared at Alara's shoulder before she could respond, his presence suddenly imposing. Hail, he said quietly. Walk away. Cedric's smirk faltered. Just making conversation, Your Grace. Walk away. The command in Alaric's voice made several nearby conversations stop. Cedric's face flushed, but he backed off with a weak laugh. Of course. Didn't mean to offend. He disappeared into the crowd. Alara let out a slow breath. Thank you. He's a coward and a fool, not worth your anger. No, he's not. But her hands were shaking. They stayed at the ball for another hour, making necessary political appearances, before finally escaping to their guest chambers. Alara stood at the window, staring out at the London lights and feeling the old suffocation creeping back. I thought I'd be stronger, she said quietly, facing them again. But hearing Cedric talk about you settling for me, about Thomas being a bastard ward. Stop, Alaric moved beside her. Nothing Cedric said was true. You know that. Do I? Alara, look at me. She turned. I didn't settle. I chose you because I recognized something in you that no one else seemed to see. Strength, intelligence, capability. You've proven me right 100 times over. His expression was fierce. You saved this estate. You helped me build a relationship with Thomas. You've transformed everything you touch. If anything, you settled by marrying me. That's not... It's absolutely true. You could have married someone warmer, someone who knows how to express affection properly, someone who wouldn't drag you to fortresses in the frozen north. His voice dropped. But you chose me anyway, and I'm grateful every day. Alara felt tears threatening again. When did you get so eloquent? I've always been eloquent. I just never had anything worth saying. He reached out hesitantly, then pulled her into an embrace, awkward, unpracticed, but genuine. Tomorrow we go home. Away from these people. Back to where you belong. She leaned into him, feeling his heartbeat steady against her cheek. Home, she repeated. Yes, let's go home. But that night, as she tried to sleep, Alara couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was coming. Cedric's words had been cruel, but also calculated. Like he was testing her, measuring her reaction. Like he was planning something. She was right. The attack came 3 weeks after they returned from London, and it was far worse than anything Alara had anticipated. She was in the estate office reviewing tenant contracts when Mrs. Blackwood appeared in the doorway, her face ashen. Your Grace, there's a letter from the Royal Society of Lineage. Alara's stomach went cold. The Royal Society was London's most prestigious genealogical institution, the authority on bloodlines, inheritance rights, and legitimacy. They didn't send casual correspondence. What does it say? Mrs. Blackwood handed over the sealed document with trembling fingers. I don't know. It's addressed to you and His Grace jointly, but the courier said it concerned Master Thomas. Alara broke the seal and read. With each line, her fury grew hotter and sharper. The letter claimed that Thomas's lineage had been investigated following an anonymous complaint. According to their findings, there was insufficient documentation proving Marcus Thornvale's paternity. Without proper proof, Thomas could not be considered legitimate heir material, could not use the Thornvale name, and should not be raised within the ducal household as if he had any claim to status or inheritance. The language was formal, officious, devastating, and at the bottom, barely visible, was a notation showing who had filed the original complaint. Cedric Hale. That bastard, Alara breathed. Your Grace? Cedric filed this. He's trying to destroy Thomas's position here, to humiliate us publicly by questioning the boy's legitimacy. Her hands shook with rage. Where's Alaric? The Northern Watchtower. Won't be back until tonight. And Thomas? In the library, last I saw. Alara's mind was racing. This wasn't just an attack on Thomas. It was an attack on the entire household. If word spread that Thornvale's ward was being challenged by the Royal Society, it would undermine everything. Merchants would question their stability. Political rivals would sense weakness. The carefully built reputation they'd cultivated would crumble, unless they fought back. Alara stood abruptly. Send riders to the watchtower. I need Alaric back immediately. And Mrs. Blackwood, not a word about this to anyone, especially not Thomas. I don't want him hearing rumors before we've decided how to handle it. Yes, Your Grace. Alara spent the rest of the afternoon pacing her chambers, fury and fear warring in her chest. Thomas was a child, an innocent child who'd already suffered enough cruelty for circumstances beyond his control. And now Cedric, that smug, vicious man, was trying to tear apart the fragile stability they'd built for him. All because Alara had rejected his cruelty and built something better. Alaric arrived as the sun was setting, mud-splattered and tense. He read the letter in silence, his scarred face growing progressively darker. Cedric Hale, he said finally. Of course it was. He's retaliating. For the ball. For me having the audacity to be successful after he tried to destroy me. He's doing more than retaliating. He's trying to destabilize us politically. Alaric set down the letter. If the Royal Society's findings become public, every rival we have will use it as ammunition. They'll claim we're harboring a child with no legitimate claim, question our judgment, suggest we're weak. So what do? We could produce documentation. Marcus kept records, letters, witnesses who can attest to the relationship with Thomas's mother. Will that be enough? Alaric's silence was answer enough. Then we need something stronger, Alara said. Something that makes the Royal Society's opinion irrelevant. Like what? She took a deep breath. We formally adopt Thomas. Make him our legal son, not just your ward. That supersedes bloodline questions. He becomes a Thornvale by law, with all the protections that brings. Alaric stared at her. You understand what that means? He'd be our heir, first in line to inherit everything. The title, the estates, all of it. I understand. We might have children of our own someday. We might not. And even if we do, Thomas deserves this. He deserves to know he's wanted, protected, not just tolerated, but chosen. Alara's voice was fierce. Cedric wants to make him feel small and illegitimate again. I won't let that happen. Ever. Alaric was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, if we do this, there's no going back. The aristocracy will have opinions. Some will see it as noble. Others will call it scandalous. A duke adopting his brother's bastard and treating him as true heir. Let them talk. We've survived worse. Have we? Alaric moved to the window, staring out at the darkening sea. This is different, Alara. This is a direct challenge to our reputation, our standing. If we handle it wrong, we could lose everything. And if we handle it right, we save a child's life. His actual life, not just his physical safety, but his sense of worth, his future, everything that matters. She moved beside him. You asked me once if I was brave enough to take what I wanted instead of what I was supposed to want. I'm asking you the same thing now. Are you brave enough to protect Thomas the way he deserves, even if society judges you for it? Alaric's jaw tightened. Then he turned to her. We'll need documentation, legal contracts, witnesses, and we'll need to present it publicly, not hide it like we're ashamed. Agreed. When? The Midsummer Assembly. It's in 6 weeks, hosted at Ravencroft's estate. Every major noble family in the north will attend. His expression was grim. If we're going to make a statement, that's the place to do it. Then we have 6 weeks to prepare. Alara felt determination settle in her bones. And Alaric, when we do this, I'm standing beside you, not behind you, beside you, as your partner in this decision. Something shifted in Alaric's expression, surprise giving way to something deeper. You've always been my partner. I'm just starting to realize how much I depend on that. Good, because you're stuck with me now. His mouth curved into an almost smile. I'm counting on it. They told Thomas the next day. The boy sat in Alara's sitting room, looking small and frightened despite being 8 years old now, and noticeably taller than when she'd first arrived. Am I in trouble? He asked. No, Alara said firmly. She sat beside him, not across from him. But something has happened that you need to know about. She explained about the Royal Society's letter, keeping the language simple but honest. Thomas's face went pale. They're saying I don't belong here. They're saying they don't have enough proof of your father's identity, Alaric corrected. He knelt down so he was at Thomas's eye level, something Alara had never seen him do. But we have proof. We know exactly who you are and where you came from. Then why? Because someone cruel filed a complaint trying to hurt us, trying to make you feel small again, the way people did in the village. Alara took Thomas's hand. But we're not going to let that happen. How? Alaric and Alara exchanged glances. Then Alaric said, we want to formally adopt you, make you our son in every legal sense. That means you'd be a Thornvale, not just by blood, but by law, our heir, protected by every right and title this family holds. Thomas's eyes went huge. You want to adopt me? We want you to be our child, Alara said softly. If you want that too. But the boy's voice cracked. I'm a bastard. Everyone says so, and you could have real children someday. You are real, Alaric said, his voice rough with emotion. You're as real as any child we might have, and you're already ours. This just makes it official. Why? Thomas whispered. Why would you do this for me? Alara felt tears burning behind her eyes but kept her voice steady. Because you deserve to be chosen. Because you're brave and smart and kind. Because watching you grow into yourself has been one of the great privileges of my life. And because I love you. The words hung in the air. She'd never said them out loud before. Not to Thomas, not to anyone in this fortress. But they were true, and he deserved to hear them. Thomas's face crumpled. He threw himself into Alara's arms, sobbing, and she held him while he shook with the force of finally being allowed to feel safe. Alaric reached out and put his hand on Thomas's shoulder, awkward still, but genuine. You're our son, he said quietly. If you'll have us as parents. Yes, Thomas choked out. Yes, please. They held him until the tears stopped, until he pulled back with red eyes and a trembling smile. Will people be angry? He asked. Some will, Alara admitted. Some will think we're making a mistake, but their opinions don't matter. What matters is that you're ours, and we're yours, and no one can take that away. What about the person who filed the complaint? The cruel one? He'll learn that attacking this family has consequences, Alaric said grimly. You let us worry about that. The next 6 weeks were a controlled storm of activity. Lawyers were consulted, documents were drawn up, letters were sent to key allies explaining the adoption and requesting their support. Alara worked 18-hour days coordinating strategy with Alaric, managing the estate, and preparing for what would essentially be a public trial of their decision. And through it all, Thomas flourished. Knowing he was chosen, not just tolerated, transformed him. He smiled more, asked more questions, started training with Alaric's guards, learning basic sword work and strategy, started sitting in on estate management meetings, absorbing information like a sponge. He's going to be formidable someday, Alaric observed one evening, watching Thomas practice forms in the courtyard. He already is, Alara replied. He survived hell and came out kind. That's more formidable than any sword skill. You love him? Of course I do. I think I do too, Alaric said quietly. I didn't expect that. When I brought him here, it was duty, obligation. But somewhere along the way, he became yours. Ours. Alara looked at her husband, this hard, scarred man who'd offered her a business arrangement and somehow become her partner, her friend, her anchor. We're doing the right thing. I know. Doesn't make it less terrifying. The midsummer assembly arrived with brutal inevitability. Ravencroft's estate was even more ostentatious than Ashworth's, all gold leaf and marble and desperate displays of wealth. The Great Hall was packed with nobility from across the northern territories, all dressed in their finest and watching each other with the predatory interest of sharks circling wounded prey. Alara wore a gown of deep burgundy, simple but elegant, with the Thornvale diamonds at her throat. Thomas stood beside her in formal clothes, looking small and terrified, but determined. Alaric was a wall of intimidating calm on her other side. Ready? Alaric murmured. No, Alara admitted, but we're doing it anyway. They entered the hall together. Conversation didn't stop. It shifted. Whispers rippled outward like stones dropped in water. That's the Thornvale boy. I heard the Royal Society questioned his legitimacy. Why would they bring him here? Cedric Hale stood near the center of the room, surrounded by his usual crowd. When he saw them, his smile turned predatory. This was it. The moment everything would be decided. Lord Ravencroft himself approached, expression carefully neutral. Duke Thornvale, Duchess, welcome. And this must be young Thomas. Our son, Alara said clearly, her voice carrying. Thomas Thornvale, legally adopted as of 3 weeks ago. The whispers exploded into actual conversation. Heads turned. Cedric's smile faltered. Ravencroft's eyebrows rose. Is that so? I wasn't aware the adoption had been formalized. We saw no reason to delay, Alaric said. The documentation is filed with the Crown. Thomas is our heir in all legal and practical senses. That's quite a bold move, considering the Royal Society's investigation. The Royal Society can investigate all they want, Alara interrupted. Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. Their concerns were about bloodline documentation. Adoption supersedes bloodline. Thomas is now a Thornvale by law, which is the only thing that matters. Some might say you're trying to legitimize a bastard through legal trickery. And I might say that anyone who questions a duke's right to choose his own heir is overstepping their bounds significantly. Alara's smile was sharp enough to cut. But I'm sure you wouldn't do something so politically foolish, Lord Ravencroft. Ravencroft blinked, clearly not expecting to be challenged so directly. Of course not. I was merely observing that others might have opinions. Others always have opinions. That's never stopped us before. Alaric's voice was quiet, but carried absolute authority. Thomas is our son. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. The threat wasn't subtle. Several nobles within earshot suddenly found the ceiling very interesting. Then Cedric stepped forward. How touching. The fortress warlord and his Amazon bride playing happy family with damaged goods. His voice was light, amused, designed to cut without seeming overtly cruel. Tell me, Thomas, do you know why they really took you in? It wasn't love. It was politics. They needed an heir and you were convenient. That's enough. Alaric's voice cut through the room like a blade. I'm just speaking truth. You're speaking poison. Alara took a step toward Cedric, her full height suddenly imposing. Let me be very clear about something, Cedric. You filed that complaint with the Royal Society because you're a small, petty man who can't stand to see others succeed. You thought you could use an innocent child as a weapon against us. I merely brought legitimate questions to the appropriate authorities. You tried to destroy a child's life because I rejected you. Alara's voice was diamond hard. Because I chose a better man and built a better life, and that makes you feel small, so you attacked the most vulnerable person you could find. The room had gone completely silent. Everyone was staring. Cedric's face flushed. That's slander. It's fact. And everyone in this room knows it. She turned to address the crowd. Thomas is my son, not by blood, but by choice. I chose to love him, to raise him, to give him the safety and dignity he deserves. And if anyone in this room has a problem with that, say it now, to my face. No one spoke. Alara turned back to Cedric. You wanted to humiliate me, to prove I was still the woman you mocked at that ball. Too much, too tall, too opinionated to matter. But I'm not that woman anymore. I'm the Duchess of Thornvale. I saved an estate through strategic genius. I command respect through capability. And I will protect my family with every resource at my disposal. She leaned closer. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to withdraw your complaint with the Royal Society. You're going to publicly apologize for the distress you've caused. And then you're going to stay far away from my family. Because if you don't, I will systematically dismantle your reputation, your business connections, and your social standing until there's nothing left but the hollow shell of a man who peaked at 25. Cedric's face had gone white. You can't. I can, and I will. Alara straightened to her full height. Test me. For a long moment, no one moved. The entire assembly seemed to be holding its breath. Then Thomas spoke up, his young voice clear and steady. She's my mother, and he's my father, and I'm their son. Anyone who says different is lying. The simple truth of it seemed to break the tension. Several nobles actually smiled. One or two nodded, And then, unexpectedly, Lord Ashworth's voice rang out from the back of the room. "Well said, young man. The boy speaks true." The old lord was leaning on a cane, looking frailer than he had weeks ago, but his voice was strong. "Duke Thornvale chose his heir. The law supports it. Anyone who questions it is questioning the authority of the peerage itself. Seems like a dangerous position to take." Other voices joined in. Agreements, murmurs of support. Not everyone. Some nobles still looked scandalized, but enough. Cedric looked around wildly, realizing he'd lost the room. "This is absurd." "What's absurd," Alaric said quietly, "is that you thought you could attack my family without consequences." He took a step forward, and even though he didn't raise his voice, everyone heard him. "You have 48 hours to file a formal withdrawal with the Royal Society and issue a public apology. If you don't, I'll call you out." The room gasped. A formal challenge, a duel, was rare, archaic, but still legal. "You wouldn't dare? Try me." Alaric's scarred face was absolutely expressionless. "I've killed men for far less than threatening my child." Cedric looked at Alara, at Alaric, at Thomas standing between them like a small soldier. Then he looked around the room and saw no support, no one willing to back him against the united front the Thornvale family presented. He deflated visibly. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Alara said. "You lost the moment you underestimated us. Now get out." Cedric turned and left, his coterie of followers trailing behind him like rats deserting a sinking ship. The room erupted into conversation. Some nobles approached to offer congratulations. Others kept their distance but nodded respectfully. Lord Ashworth made his way over, grinning despite his obvious pain. "That was magnificent," he said. "Absolutely magnificent. You didn't just defend your position, you dominated the entire room." "We protected our son," Alara said. "That's all." "That's everything." Ashworth looked at Thomas. "Young man, you have remarkable parents. Learn from them." "I will, sir," Thomas said, still processing everything that had just happened. As the evening wore on, more nobles approached, some curious, some supportive, some clearly calculating how this development affected their own political positions. Alara handled them all with the same calm authority she'd used on Cedric, making it clear that the matter was settled, and any further challenges would be met with equal force. When they finally escaped to their guest chambers late that night, Alara's legs nearly gave out. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation drained away, leaving her shaking. Alaric caught her arm. "Steady. I'm fine. Just, that was intense. That was incredible." He guided her to a chair. "You eviscerated Cedric in front of everyone who matters. Defended Thomas. Made it clear that attacking us has consequences. I've never seen anything like it. We both did it. You backed me up perfectly. Because you were right." Alaric knelt down in front of her, the second time she'd seen him kneel to anyone. "Alara, what you did tonight, what you've done since you arrived, you've transformed everything. The estate, Thomas, me. You made us into something stronger than we were. We did it together." "No. You led. I followed." His expression was raw, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "I need you to know something. This marriage started as a practical arrangement, a solution to mutual problems. But somewhere along the way, it became real. You became essential, not just useful, essential, and I—" He stopped, struggling with words. "I'm not good at this, at expressing things. But I need you to know that I care for you, deeply, in ways I didn't think I was still capable of feeling." Alara's breath caught. "Alaric, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know." He stood, looking uncomfortable. "I'll let you rest." "Wait," she caught his hand. "I care for you too, more than I expected, more than I knew how to admit." She smiled through tears. "You're a difficult, intimidating man who's terrible at small talk and barely knows how to show affection, and somehow you've become the best thing that ever happened to me." Alaric's scarred face softened. "We're quite a pair." "We really are." He leaned down and kissed her forehead, a gesture so gentle it made her chest ache. "Get some rest." Tomorrow we go home. Home, she repeated. The word felt more real every time she said it. That night, lying in bed, Ilara stared at the ceiling and took stock of her life. 6 months ago, she'd been standing in a frozen garden, broken and humiliated, making a desperate choice to marry a stranger who promised her power instead of love. Now she had a child who called her mother, a partner who respected her mind and defended her fiercely, an estate she'd helped save through her own strategic thinking, and a place where she belonged, not despite her intelligence or her height or her refusal to be small, but because of those things. It wasn't the life she'd imagined as a girl reading fairy tales in her father's library. It was better, harder, messier, more real. And it was hers, completely, absolutely hers. The ride back to Thornvale took 3 days, and with each mile north, Ilara felt something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly. She'd learned that peace was overrated, but certainty. They'd faced the worst society could throw at them and won, not through compromise or apology, but through sheer force of will and united front. Thomas rode beside them in the carriage, alternating between excited chatter and exhausted silence. The confrontation had drained him, but there was something different in his posture now, straighter, more confident. "Do you think Cedric will really withdraw the complaint?" he asked on the second day. "He will," Alaric said. "He's a coward. Cowards fold when confronted directly." "What if he doesn't?" "Then I'll call him out, and he'll either fight or be branded a coward publicly. Either way, he loses." Alaric's voice was matter-of-fact. "Men like Cedric only have power when no one challenges them. We challenged him. He's finished." Thomas absorbed this quietly. Then he said, "I was scared. When you were talking to him, I thought maybe he'd convince everyone you were wrong." "Were you scared we'd give you up?" Ilara asked gently. "A little." "Thomas," she took his hand, "listen to me very carefully. We fought for you in front of every noble who matters. We claimed you publicly. We made you our son in every legal and moral sense. That's not something you take back. Ever. Even if it makes things harder for you?" "Especially then," Alaric said. "Family isn't convenient. It's commitment. You're ours now. That doesn't change based on political pressure or social opinion." Thomas's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Thank you for choosing me." "Thank you for letting us," Ilara replied. They reached Thornvale on the evening of the 3rd day, just as the sun was setting over the cliffs. The fortress rose against the darkening sky like something carved from the bones of the earth itself. Gray stone, iron gates, walls thick enough to withstand centuries of storms. Home. Mrs. Blackwood met them in the courtyard, her stern face creased with anxiety. "Your Graces, Master Thomas, thank the heavens you're back safely. We heard rumors. All true, probably," Ilara said, climbing down from the carriage. "But we survived. Is everything in order here?" "Yes, Your Grace, though the supply shipment from the new wool merchant arrived early, and I wasn't sure about the quality. I'll inspect it tomorrow. Tonight I just want hot food in my own bed." Mrs. Blackwood smiled. "Already prepared, Your Grace. And Master Thomas, there's fresh honey cakes in the kitchen. Cook made them special for your return." Thomas's face lit up. "Really? Really? Now get inside before you freeze. The wind's picking up." They spent that evening in comfortable domesticity. Dinner in the small dining room, not the formal hall. Thomas between them at the table, chattering about everything he'd seen in London. The buildings, the crowds, the strange accents. Alaric listened with genuine interest, asking questions, making Thomas laugh with dry observations about Southern nobility. Watching them together, Ilara felt her throat tighten. This was what she'd wanted without knowing she wanted it. Not romance like in the novels she'd read as a girl, but this, partnership, family, purpose. The 3 of them building something real from pieces that hadn't fit anywhere else. After Thomas went to bed, Ilara and Alaric sat by the fire in his study, reviewing the week's estate correspondence. It was their routine now, these quiet evenings working side by side. Comfortable silence, punctuated by occasional questions or observations. "Lord Ashworth sent a letter," Alaric said, breaking the silence. "Arrived while we were traveling." "What does it say?" "He's dying. Weeks, maybe days. He wants us to come south one more time before the end." Alaric's expression was grim. and he's asking me to support his nephew's succession, to use our influence to smooth the transition. Will you? The nephew's an idiot, but he's not malicious, just incompetent, and the alternative candidates are worse, ambitious, ruthless men who destabilize the entire region. He rubbed his scarred jaw. Sometimes you don't choose the best option. You choose the least destructive one. Do you want to go? I respected Ashworth. He was one of the few Southern nobles worth knowing. I owe him a final visit. Alaric looked at her. Would you come with me? Of course, though I'm not eager to return to London so soon. We wouldn't stay long, just long enough to pay respects and make the political gestures. He hesitated. Alara, about what I said in London, about caring for you, you don't have to explain. I do, because I wasn't clear enough. He set down his papers and turned to face her fully. When I married you, I thought I was getting a competent administrator, someone to manage the household and help with Thomas, a practical solution to practical problems. I remember you were very clear about the terms. I was wrong about what those terms would mean. His dark eyes were intense. You didn't just manage the household, you transformed it. You didn't just help with Thomas, you became his mother in every way that matters. You didn't just solve problems, you anticipated them, prevented them, turned potential disasters into victories. He leaned forward. You saved this estate, multiple times, through strategy I would never have conceived, and somewhere in the middle of all that, you became the most important person in my life. Alara's heart was pounding. Alaric, I'm not asking you to say anything back. I know this isn't the relationship you imagined. I'm difficult and scarred and terrible at expressing emotion. But I need you to understand what you are to me. Not a convenient wife, not an administrator. You're my partner, my equal, the person I trust more than anyone else in the world. You're also, Alara said softly, the first person who ever saw me as I actually am and didn't ask me to be smaller. You gave me power when everyone else wanted to take it away. You trusted my intelligence when others called it unfeminine. You stood beside me when I faced down the people who tried to destroy me. She moved closer. I didn't marry you for love, but I love you now, completely, even though you're terrible at romantic speeches and you scowl at everything. Alaric's expression shifted, surprise giving way to something raw and vulnerable. You love me. Apparently I'm terrible at recognizing my own feelings, but yes, I love you. He reached out and pulled her into his arms, not hesitantly this time, but with certainty. His kiss was unpracticed, fierce, genuine. When they broke apart, he was almost smiling. We're absurd, he said, completely. A political marriage that became real. The best kind of real, built on respect and trust instead of illusion. He kissed her again, and this time when she leaned into him, it felt like coming home in a different way. Not to a place, but to a person who'd given her the freedom to be exactly who she was. They went to London 2 weeks later for Ashworth's final days. The old lord was barely conscious, his body failing rapidly, but he recognized them when they entered his chambers. Thornvale, he rasped, and the Duchess. Good. Wanted to see you. We came as soon as we could, Alaric said. Stubborn old fool, waiting this long to die. Ashworth's laugh turned into a cough. Wanted to see if you'd actually pull it off. The adoption, the public defense, making those bastards accept it. We pulled it off, Alara confirmed. Magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. His pale eyes focused on her. You know what you did? You showed them that intelligence and courage matter more than birth and beauty. You forced them to acknowledge it. That's legacy, girl. That's real power. I just protected my family. Exactly. And in doing so, you changed the rules. He reached out a shaking hand and Alara took it. Promise me something. When I'm gone and my idiot nephew takes over, keep an eye on him. Don't let him destroy everything I built. You have the mind for it. Use it. I promise. And you, Ashworth turned to Alaric, stop hiding in your fortress. The North needs voices like yours, leaders who actually lead instead of just posture. Don't waste it. I won't. Ashworth closed his eyes. Good. Now get out. I'm tired. They left him sleeping and spent the next 2 days making arrangements with his nephew, a nervous young man named Frederick, who was clearly terrified of the responsibility he was inheriting. But he listened when they offered advice, took notes when they explained the political landscape, and showed genuine gratitude for their guidance. "He might actually survive this," Alaric observed as they prepared to leave, "if we help him, and if he's smart enough to ask for help when he needs it." That's a lot of ifs. Leadership always is. Lord Ashworth died 3 days after their departure. The news reached them via messenger just as autumn was settling into Thornvale, leaves turning gold and copper, the wind carrying the first edge of winter cold. "He was a good man," Alaric said quietly, staring at the letter. "He was, and he saw us clearly. That matters." They attended the funeral, of course, made the political gestures, supported Frederick's succession, assured the northern nobles that Thornvale would honor the existing agreements. It was exhausting and necessary, and Alara was profoundly grateful when they finally returned home. Thomas was waiting in the courtyard when they arrived, now 9 years old and growing into someone confident and capable. He'd been training with the guards, studying strategy with Alaric's officers, and working through mathematics with a tutor Alara had hired. He was turning into exactly the kind of heir they'd hoped for: intelligent, thoughtful, brave without being reckless. "How was London?" he asked as they dismounted. "Tedious and necessary," Alaric replied. "How were things here?" "Good. I helped Mrs. Blackwood with the supply inventory, and I think I found a mistake in the timber contract. The merchant is charging for higher grade wood but delivering standard. I marked the discrepancy for you to review." Alara and Alaric exchanged glances. "You reviewed the timber contracts?" Alara asked. "You said understanding the estate meant understanding all the operations. I was curious." Thomas looked uncertain. "Was that wrong?" "That was excellent," Alaric said. "Show me what you found." Watching them walk toward the study together, heads bent over Thomas's notes, Alara felt something settle deep in her bones. Pride. Satisfaction. The certainty that they'd built something lasting. The years that followed were not easy, but they were good. The estate prospered under their combined management, Alaric handling military and political matters, Alara overseeing trade and finances, Thomas learning both sides as he grew. The merchant routes through the Serpent's Channel became established trade paths, bringing wealth and security. The tenant farming program expanded, turning struggling laborers into profitable partners. And slowly, grudgingly, the northern nobility accepted what the Thornvales had built. Not because they approved, many still considered the adoption scandalous, but because results were impossible to argue with. Thornvale was prosperous, stable, and increasingly influential. That commanded respect whether people liked it or not. Cedric Hale, meanwhile, faded into irrelevance. He withdrew the Royal Society complaint as demanded, issued a public apology that fooled no one, and then quietly left London for his family's country estate. Word filtered back that he'd fallen into debt, lost his social standing, and eventually married a wealthy widow twice his age who barely tolerated his presence. "Should I feel guilty?" Alara asked one evening when news of Cedric's latest misfortune reached them. "Why would you?" Alaric replied. "Because we destroyed him, systematically. We defended ourselves. He destroyed himself by attacking us." Alaric looked up from his correspondence. "Do you actually feel guilty?" Alara considered this honestly. "No, not even a little bit. He tried to hurt our child. I'd do it again." "Good. Then stop questioning it," she smiled. "You're very practical about vengeance." "I'm practical about everything. You knew that when you married me." Thomas appeared in the doorway, now 14 and nearly as tall as Alaric. "Am I interrupting?" "Never," Alara said. "What do you need?" "Nothing. I just wanted to say good night." He hesitated. "And to thank you, both of you, for today." "What happened today?" Alaric asked. "I was in the village market and someone recognized me. One of the men who used to throw stones when I was little. He's a tenant farmer now, one of the ones who got loans from our program." Thomas's voice was steady, but Alara could hear the emotion underneath. "He apologized, said he was ashamed of how he treated me, said I'd grown into someone worth respecting." "What did you say?" Alara asked softly. "I said that respect earned through fear doesn't last, but respect earned through fairness does. That's what you've taught me." He looked between them. I wouldn't be here without you, either of you. I'd still be in that village, being called bastard and believing I was worthless. Instead, I'm the Thornvale heir, learning to manage an estate, and people apologize for how they treated me. His voice cracked slightly. I know I'm not your blood child, but you're my parents in every way that matters. And I love you both. Alara crossed the room and pulled him into a hug. He was taller than her now, this boy who'd been so small and frightened when she'd first arrived. You're our son, completely, always. Alaric stood and put his hand on Thomas's shoulder. We're proud of you, extraordinarily proud. You've become exactly who you were meant to be. Thanks to you. Thanks to yourself. We just gave you the space to grow. After Thomas left, Alara leaned against Alaric's shoulder. We did it. Did what? Built something good, something lasting. We took broken pieces, you, me, Thomas, and made them into a family. An unconventional, stubborn, slightly dysfunctional family, but a real one. You sound surprised. I am, a little. When I married you, I thought I was trading one kind of cage for another. Bigger, more comfortable, but still a cage. She turned to look at him. But you gave me wings instead. Freedom to be exactly who I am. Power to use my mind. Authority to make real decisions. And somehow, in the process, you gave me love. Real love. Not the fairy tale kind, but the kind that's built on trust and respect and working through problems together. Alaric pulled her closer. You gave me the same. I was living in this fortress like a prison, going through motions, protecting a child I didn't know how to reach. You showed me what partnership actually looks like, what family can be when it's chosen instead of obligated. He kissed her forehead. I never expected to feel this way again. After Catherine died, I thought I was done with emotion, but you proved me wrong. They stood together in the firelight, two people who'd started as strangers with a business arrangement and become something infinitely more complex and real. The seasons turned. Thomas grew into a young man of remarkable capability, diplomatic like Alara, strategic like Alaric, and kind in his own right. At 16, he started accompanying Alaric on border negotiations. At 18, he began managing portions of the estate independently. At 20, he was assisting with regional political matters, and nobles who'd once questioned his legitimacy now sought his counsel. Alara watched his transformation with fierce pride and occasional disbelief. This was the frightened child who'd hidden in his rooms, terrified of loud noises and human interaction. Now he commanded respect through competence and integrity. We did good work, she said one evening, watching Thomas ride out to inspect the northern watchtowers with a contingent of guards. We did, Alaric agreed. He looked older now, gray threading through his dark hair, but still imposing, still hers. Though he did most of it himself, we just gave him the foundation. That's all any parent can do. They'd talked about having other children over the years, decided against it, not out of inability, but out of contentment with what they'd built. Thomas was their heir, their son, and any other children would have complicated that in ways none of them wanted. Besides, the estate kept them busy enough. Word reached them periodically about Cedric. Each report was grimmer than the last. Debts mounting, reputation destroyed. His wealthy widow wife had died, leaving her fortune to her actual children and Cedric with almost nothing. He'd tried to rebuild his standing, but the memory of his public humiliation at the Midsummer Assembly followed him everywhere. Eventually, word stopped coming entirely. Cedric faded into complete obscurity, forgotten by the same social circles he'd once commanded. Do you ever think about him? Alaric asked one day when a letter mentioned Cedric's latest failure. Sometimes, but not with anger anymore, just pity. Alara set down the letter. He had everything, charm, looks, privilege, and he wasted it being cruel. He could have built something meaningful. Instead, he spent his energy destroying others, and it destroyed him instead. Poetic justice. Practical justice. The world has a way of balancing accounts eventually. On Thomas's 21st birthday, they held a formal celebration. Not the ostentatious kind favored in London, but a gathering at Thornvale with the people who mattered. Estate staff, tenant farmers, local merchants, a select group of northern nobles who'd become genuine allies over the years. Thomas stood before the assembled crowd, confident and poised, and gave a speech about responsibility and stewardship and honoring the legacy built by his parents. Elora listened with tears streaming down her face, not bothering to hide them. "He's magnificent," she whispered to Alaric. "He is, because you made him believe he could be." "We made him believe?" After the speeches and the dinner, after most of the guests had left, the three of them sat in Alaric's study, now more accurately called the family study, since all of them used it regularly. 21, Thomas said, shaking his head. "I can't believe it." "Feels like yesterday you were 8 years old and terrified of everything," Elara said. "I was terrified of everything. You taught me I didn't have to be." "We taught you that courage isn't the absence of fear," Alaric corrected. "It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. I learned that from both of you, from watching you navigate the Royal Society Challenge, from seeing Mother face down Cedric Hale, from watching Father negotiate peace with raider clans who wanted war." Thomas looked between them. "You've given me every tool I need to do this job right, to be a good heir, eventually a good duke." "Not for many years yet," Alaric said firmly. "I'm not planning on dying anytime soon." "Good. I still need the guidance." "You'll always have it," Elara assured him. "Even when we're old and useless, we'll be here offering unsolicited advice. I'll always want it." Thomas smiled. "You know what the best part is? I have proof that family isn't about blood. It's about choice. You chose me when no one else would, and I choose you every day." Elara reached across and gripped his hand. "Best choice we ever made." The years continued their relentless march forward. Elara's hair turned silver at the temples. Alaric moved more carefully, his old battle wounds catching up with him. Thomas took on more and more responsibility, eventually running the daily operations while they provided oversight and wisdom. And through it all, Thornvale flourished. The fortress that had been a symbol of isolation became a center of trade and diplomacy. The estate that had nearly fallen to bankruptcy became one of the most prosperous in the north. The family that had been questioned and challenged became a model of unconventional success. One winter evening, when Elara was 53 and Alaric 58, they stood on the walls watching snow fall over the sea. Thomas was in the village settling a land dispute. The fortress was quiet around them, peaceful in a way it had never been when Elara first arrived. "Do you ever regret it?" Alaric asked. "The life you could have had if you'd stayed in London. Married someone charming and conventional." Elara laughed. "Are you joking? That life would have killed me. Slowly, through 1,000 small suffocations." She leaned against him. "This life, difficult, complicated, unconventional as it is, this is everything I needed. Purpose, partnership, power used for good instead of hoarded selfishly. A child who needed me, a man who saw me clearly and loved me anyway. I didn't love you anyway. I loved you because of who you are. All of it. The intelligence that makes you dangerous, the height that intimidates people, the stubbornness that drives me insane sometimes, all of it. We're quite a pair. We really are." They stood together watching the snow accumulate, two people who'd started as strangers and become each other's foundations. Years later, when Elara was 68 and Alaric 73, Thomas married, a brilliant young woman named Helena who reminded Elara of herself in the best ways. Sharp, capable, refusing to be diminished. Thomas had chosen well. "He learned from the best," Helena said on her wedding day, embracing Elara. "He told me everything, how you saved the estate, how you faced down the Royal Society, how you made him feel worthy when the world said he wasn't. You're legendary." "I'm practical. There's a difference." "You're both," Helena smiled, "and I intend to learn from your example." Watching Thomas and Helena together, Elara felt the circle complete itself. Another generation carrying forward the legacy of chosen family, strategic thinking, and refusing to accept society's limitations. When Alaric finally died at 79, peacefully, in his sleep, his hand clasped in Elara's, the entire Northern Territory mourned. But his legacy was secure. Thomas was a duke who commanded respect across the realm. The estate was prosperous and stable. The family he'd built through unconventional means had become unshakable. Elara lived 5 more years after Alaric's death, long enough to see Thomas and Helena's first child born, a daughter they named Catherine Elara, honoring both grandmothers. Long enough to know that everything they'd built would continue long after she was gone. On her last morning, sitting in her chambers overlooking the sea she'd come to love, Alara thought about the girl she'd been, standing in that frozen garden, broken by Cedric's cruelty, making a desperate choice to marry a stranger who promised her power instead of romance. She'd thought she was choosing survival. Instead, she'd chosen transformation. She'd forced the world to change around her, one strategic decision at a time. She'd turned a cold arrangement into genuine love. She'd made a terrified child into a confident heir. She'd built an empire on intelligence and courage instead of birth and beauty. And she'd done it all while refusing to be smaller, quieter, more acceptable. The people who'd mocked her were forgotten or diminished. Cedric had died years ago, alone and irrelevant. The women who'd whispered about her behind fans had faded into obscurity. The system that had tried to break her had bent instead. Alara closed her eyes and smiled. She hadn't just survived the storm. She'd become the force that reshaped it. And in the end, that was everything that mattered. Thomas found her an hour later, peaceful in her chair, the afternoon sun warming her face. He wept, as did Helena, as did their daughter who'd barely known her grandmother but had heard the stories. They buried her beside Alaric on the cliffs overlooking the sea, with a simple stone that read, Alara Thornvale, Duchess, Strategist, Mother. She refused to be small. And in the fortress she'd helped build, in the estate she'd helped save, in the family she'd helped create, her legacy lived on. Not in grand monuments or legendary tales, but in practical choices made with courage. In unconventional families built on choice rather than blood. In women who refused to diminish themselves for comfort. The world remembered the Duchess of Thornvale not as the Amazon giantess she'd once been mocked as, but as the strategist who'd saved an estate through sheer intelligence. The woman who'd stood before the northern aristocracy and defended her family with unshakable conviction. The mother who'd chosen her child and never wavered. Years became decades. Thomas grew old and passed the title to his daughter Catherine, who ruled with the same fierce intelligence her grandmother had possessed. The Thornvale line continued, stronger with each generation, built on the foundation Alara and Alaric had laid. And sometimes, on winter evenings when the wind screamed across the cliffs and the sea crashed against stone, the people of Thornvale told stories about the Duchess who'd arrived from London expecting nothing and built everything. The woman who'd been too tall, too smart, too much for the world she'd been born into, and who'd found a place where those qualities made her legendary. She hadn't changed to fit the world. She'd forced the world to change around her. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all.